As Ashley shifted from the modern world to the game world via the VR technology, she felt very odd, almost like she was simply a soul without their body. She was not entirely sure how long she floated in this endless void, but it felt calming. Maybe this is what those sensory deprivation tanks feel like, Ashley thought to herself as she simply drifted in her non existent state. After some time passed, she felt her whole body begin to warm up slowly. Once her warmth reached slightly above room temperature, she finally felt her body around her soul. With this, she attempted to open her eyes, and as she expected, her eyes obeyed her commands. Now, with her eyes open, she saw what looked to be particles colored red and black swarming around her and quickly absorbing into her skin. Ashley assumed that whatever those particles were, they were probably just appeared whenever a player loaded into the game. She knew that some games like to make flashy entrances whenever a player logged into the game, so she didn't really put much thought into it. After that, it only took her a few moments for her to sit up and observe her surroundings. Upon inspection, she saw various pieces of furniture within the room she was in. She was currently laying on a bed, and on the wall opposite of the bed was what appeared to be a wardrobe. Ashley was not entirely sure if it was a wardrobe, but it looked to be for storage. And if she was in a room with a bed, she can only assume she was in the bedroom of the building. Though she knew she was playing a Guardian Tales game that was made specifically for testing the VR system, the architecture of the room was not immediately recognized by her. It seemed to be primarily some type of blackened steel, with the main lighting for the room being the purple LED lights that adorn the floors, walls, and ceiling. One thing Ashley noticed while trying to identify her surroundings was the graphics of the game. They felt very realistic to Ashley. It was the most realistic graphics she had ever seen in a video game before, so she was indeed surprised that the people who had worked on the VR device had put this much effort into was essentially a tech demo to test their new technology. Although it was super realistic, it still gave Ashley the uncanny valley feeling. It was as if her mind was both telling her what she was looking at is realistic and cartoon like at the same time. This was to be expected, as it was impossible with modern technology to craft perfectly realistic objects. Though this was all making sense to Ashley, something about the graphics of the game was calling her attention. She could not for the life of her figure out what it was, but she felt like what she was understanding was not what was happening. Ashley sat there for a good 3.5 minutes, just entranced by what wasn't making sense. Soon, though, Ashley shook her head, which effectively snapped her out of the trance. She stood up from the bed she was still sitting on and headed out to the door of the room. The door wasn't a door she was used to, but it fit in very well with her environment. It was the size of a single door, but there was a split in the center of the door that performed a double-pointed lightning bolt type separation. As Ashley walked close to the door with intent to walk through, it just slid open on its own. With the door now open, Ashley could now see that behind the once closed door was a hallway. On the opposite side of the hall was another door, and down the hall to the right was another room that Ashley couldn't quite see yet. To the left of the hallway was simply a wall. Before going to the main room at the end of the hall, Ashley walked over to the door on the opposite side of the hall. Just like before, it opened on its own. This room appeared to be the bathroom of the building. Like any bathroom, it had a sink, mirror, bathtub, shower, and what she assumed to be a toilet. It wasn't shaped like any traditional toilet she had seen, but it had all the required components of one. She admired this bathroom for about a minute before finally walking into the room. Once she entered the room, she caught sight of her avatar in the mirror, which she then turned towards to admire herself more closely. In the character creator, she had chosen to be an invader as her species. This meant that she had horns, a knife-like tail, as well as reddish skin tone. Looking closer at her avatar, she saw all the features she adjusted. Her eyes were a blue color that almost shined as she saw them, while her bright orange hair fell to just above her hips on her back. And on her front fell to her nose, but was parted so that her eyes were visible, but still kept a roundish triangle between her eyes. Strands of hair did also fall on either side of the front of her head to go rest in front of her shoulders. The horns on her head were ever so slightly above the front of her forehead, curled upwards with a just noticeable curl towards the back of her head. On her backside was a tail that was a darker shade of red than the rest of her body, and had a long knife-like tip at the end of it. The other thing that was evident was that she was on the short side, something that Ashley was glad to be experiencing at that moment in time. "Wow, I look great," Ashley said, but was surprised to hear that the voice that came out of her mouth was feminine. She was a trans femme, so she had a more masculine voice that she hated, but hearing this voice out loud made her so happy. She spent a good chunk of time just saying random sentences and phrases before she noticed something odd about it. She knew that a VR system shouldn't be able to do this to one's voice. Even if they used a voice changer, Ashley should be hearing her own voice as she says it out loud. Although Ashley quickly chalked this up to sound canceling headphones and a very good voice changer that updates in nearly the same millisecond the sounds are sent through. Ashley quickly decided to stop thinking on the more confusing aspects of this game and VR system and decided to try to locate her friends. She quickly stepped out of the bathroom and started walking down the hallway into a bigger room. This room seemed to be split into two separate sections, with one section being a dining room style room complete with a small table surrounded by four chairs. Each chair had a sort of concave area around the back on the surface you sit on so the invaders could sit comfortably with their tails. The second section looked to be styled as a kitchen, though it was a different design than the traditional modern kitchens Ashley was used to. This kitchen seemed to be designed with the idea to take up as little ground space as possible instead of the idea Ashley was used to having a decently sized kitchen that takes up a good amount of space. The kitchen was mostly set into the walls instead of being set in front of the walls. The oven and fridge laid flush to the wall, while a small, indented area held the countertops. The sink was a separate indented area that was solely the sink, with the water running from the ceiling of the indent instead of a tap. After taking in a good portion of her surroundings, she headed towards the door that seemed to occupy the center of the dining room wall, on the opposite side of the hallway. When she had opened the door, she found a rather large hallway with doors on both sides. Each door had a nameplate with numbers as well as names Ashley didn't recognize, except for the one on the door which stated her name. The architecture was still a darker seal with purple lights adorning the surfaces. With the only hesitation being to read a few of the nameplates, Ashley started walking down the hallway in search of her friends. For a good while, the hallways solely contained the apartment-like hallways, though after a certain threshold, the architecture seemed to shift ever so slightly. It was as if Ashley had stepped into a section of the building that had a different purpose. Although the architecture of this new section made a bell go off in Ashley's head, she recognized the architecture from World 15, otherwise known as Assault. In that part of the game, you infiltrate an invading invader ship. The ship appears to have a similar yet slightly different design to the building Ashley was currently in. From this deduction, Ashley realized a number of things. The first thing she took note of is that she's not in a building, but rather an invader ship. She was not sure which ship she was in yet, though she had enough understanding that it was a larger class ship. The second thing she realized was that everyone must have started in an area reminiscent of their species. Since Ashley was an invader, she started on an invader ship. Taking a moment to grumble in frustration, she realized the flaw in not knowing about their characters with her friends beforehand. If they had known what each person was going to make for their character, she might have been able to locate them easily. Though because the only character she knew was her own, locating her friends would be a troublesome task. After a few moments trying to figure out what species her friends might have chosen, she shrugged it off as she still had to figure out exactly where she was. Since she was also in a spaceship, figuring out her location wasn't as simple as finding out which ship she was on. She also had to figure out where she was in space. She could be traveling to a world, or she could be orbiting either Titus or the Demon World. Considering how little invader architecture is actually displayed throughout the game, Ashley wasn't sure of how to figure out her current location. All she could do was walk around and hope that she could find some sort of indicator. As she walked around, she started to spot other invaders walking the halls as well. Though she was used to seeing invaders in their traditional armor variants, this time they walked around in a more casual type clothing. There were invaders in dresses, pants, shirts, jackets, and with other articles of clothing as well, though they were all adjusted to fit the invaders' tails and horns. This deeply confused Ashley. Why would the developers of this prototype put so much effort into a game for the sole purpose of testing the VR system? None of this is explored in the game, and they all move around and act so lifelike. Ashley thought to herself, though she didn't have much time to ponder her questions as she saw a formidable sight. To her right was a giant window that nearly spanned from the floor to the ceiling of the hallway. Outside that window was a vast and beautiful outer space. She was entranced by the beauty of the stars and clouds that filled the void of space. She finally understood what was so enticing about a sky unaffected by light pollution. She stood there for a good chunk of time, just admiring the beauty of the scenery in front of her before snapping out of her trance. With the realization that she could better figure out her current location via this window, She stepped closer to the glass that separated her from the vastness of space. Looking around the sides that were slightly obscured by the edges of the glass, she could see several massive panels that covered the ship. Each panel had lines of purple lighting that was proportional to the size of the panels they sat on. Though it took a few moments before she noticed the obvious centerpiece to the front of the ship. To her left was a giant minotaur-like head with a giant pyramid sticking out of where the mouth should be. The height of the head was nearly the same size of the height of the ship as well. With the obvious staple to the ship sitting right in front of her, she finally realized a good amount of things about her whereabouts. The first and most obvious thing was that she was currently aboard the Invader mothership. The second thing she could make an educated guess was that she was on the Guardian Tales timeline. Considering from World 1 to 9 it is known the mothership orbits Titus, Ashley knew she was either currently before the events of the prologue, or in the unknown 10-year time period before the Unrecorded World Part 1. She considered these two time periods as before the prologue the mothership is heading towards Titus, and in the unrecorded world it is confirmed that it arrives at the demon world around that time. For context about the unrecorded world, it takes place 10 years in the future of the events of World 9. A time portal sends the player to the future, showing a future where the invaders won, and most of the species on Titus have been killed off. There's one other time period that she could potentially be in, and that is somewhere in the Season 2 time. Considering the mothership is never seen nor mentioned in Season 2, other than at the start of it, at least to Ashley's knowledge. This means it is possible the game she is currently playing takes place during Season 2 of Guardian Tales. Now that Ashley knew pretty much all the bases of her current situation, she started to get rather excited. She was alone and free to explore the very realistic version of the world from her favorite game. To her, it was like booting up a highly anticipated game for the first time on launch day. The feeling it gave was absolute wonder and awe. With this excitement finally starting to reach her brain, she started to run down hall after hall, taking in all the sights of this expansive environment. She wasn't running long before running into other invaders. She ended up running directly into an invader male who had a sniper rifle strapped to their back. They ended up tumbling to the ground with Ashley laying on top of the invader she ran into. I'm so sorry. I wasn't looking where I was going and ran right into you, Ashley said hurriedly while getting off of the poor guy. When Ashley finally stood up, she saw two other invaders standing beside the one she ran into. One of them was male, had a dagger-like weapon in their hand, and had a lighter style armor. The other one was a female, and was wearing what you would commonly think of as an MMO or D&D cleric clothing. It's alright, ma'am. We all sometimes forget to look where we're going when we get excited. I'm guilty of that myself, the sniper-holding invader said, giggling slightly. Yeah, you're guilty of that every time they serve Swedish meatballs in the cafeteria, the dagger-wielding invader teased. Hey, I can't help just how good food tastes, the sniper-holding invader said with a pleading tone. Please, don't mind these two, miss. They're a very chaotic duo. My name is Sage, and it is a pleasure to meet you, the cleric invader said softly. My name is Ashley, said Ashley happily. Those two guys, Sage said, pointing to the two behind her, firstly to the sniper-holding invader, then to the dagger-wielding one, is Kai and Lloyd. Heya, said Kai. Nice to meet you, said Lloyd. After a bit of time, Sage ended up speaking to Ashley again, her voice calm and soft. I don't think I've ever seen you around, Ashley. Are you perhaps a new recruit? Or maybe you're transferred to the section? The question caught Ashley off guard as she wasn't really told the backstory of the game. All she knew was that she chose the invader species and woke up on the invader mothership. She had no idea whether she was a war veteran or someone who was new to a soldier's ranks. Though Ashley did consider the idea that they were always in the section of the ship. It was just that they had yet to meet because of circumstances. In the end, Ashley came up with the choice that would help her out the most. I am new around here and I'm very lost. I'm sure if I tried to find my room again, I would end up somehow going in the wrong direction. The next to speak up was Lloyd, who sounded like he was trying to suppress his excitement. Seems like we're about to have a new rookie to toy with. Kai then jumped up in front of Ashley with sparkles of joy filling their eyes. We could show you around the section. Sage and Lloyd both nod at Kai's idea. Ashley, seeing this, smiles happily. Thanks, I would really like it if you could show me around. I'll try to remember, but I got a track record of bad memory. Kai started lightly laughing at the comment. We all got our weak points. Kai then went to stand side by side with Ashley, playfully pinching her arm. Some weak points are just weaker than others. Sage then showed a little frustration, but it somehow didn't manage to make her voice any less soft than it was before. Kai, that is no way to speak to someone you just met. It is fine. I like to tease my friends as well, Ashley said, giggling. Lloyd then took a step forward to intrude into the conversation. Why don't we show her the cafeteria first? It's around lunchtime, and I am personally getting a little hungry. Kai then looked at Lloyd and smiled a wicked grin. Oh, someone is guilty of wanting food in the cafeteria? Lloyd took that comment well, but decided to play an act of frustration to play into his friend's antics. Guys, we have a subordinate here. Why don't we show them just how reliable we can be? Sage said, shaking her head as she was disappointed. The two guys just laughed it off, then straightened themselves out. Soon the four of them were once again walking the halls of the mothership, though this time with a specific destination in mind. After a few corners and hallways, they arrived at a large room. Ashley knew it was a cafeteria because the others had told her it was that, and there were tables everywhere. But had it not been for that, she would have thought it was simply a grand hall. The design felt more like an artist painted the centerpiece of a fictional famous mall than constructed here in the Invader style. There were stairs that led to a second floor that had a massive wraparound balcony that looked over a portion of the first floor. On the first floor, there were areas that held holograms and physical artwork that were sectioned off with a short raised wall. The room amazed Ashley to even look at. The next area they visited was a store area. To Ashley, this area reminded her greatly of Walmart, a general store that had a section for everything, from clothing to entertainment to food. This area felt very generic. It showcased all the products on shelves for all to see just like the real world does. The third place they visited was close by to the store. It was the blacksmith. Though it was called the blacksmith, they did a lot more than blacksmithing. The place was where they manufactured and sold the weapons and armor to the soldiers. This meant that they had to mold the weapons, add their technology, and add magic integration for those who were magic adept. This place was more of a science lab mixed with a blacksmith than being just a blacksmith. Standing in it, Ashley could see many different weapons. Some of them were large and blunt, some were blade weapons, others were rifles. The fourth area they visited was the training area. It was a very large room filled with many different obstacle courses, gym equipment, and training dummies. In the center of the room was a raised platform that looked to be some sort of ring used for duels. To Ashley, this room felt like a field filled with places where one can test the limits of their brain, strength, and magical energy. The last place they visited was a sort of central common area. It had multiple areas for different reasons. One area had tables and chairs as a sort of communal area for catching up with friends. Another area had TVs and comfy chairs that Ashley assumed was used for entertainment purposes. A third area was simply a floor that was extremely fluffy. There were a few invaders laying on the fluffy floor, so Ashley assumed it was a place to collapse on the ground after a long day. Though, before Ashley could finish looking at all the stuff in this area, on a wall that seemed to have an overlooking area above it that was fenced off, was a large screen. On the screen was a small looping animation of the mothership flying through space. Above the animations were shapes that seemed to spell out the words ETA, 1 month until arrival at Titus. On seeing this, Ashley mumbled under her breath. So, we're around 1 month before the events of the prologue, if I am to understand this correctly. Did you say something, Ashley? Kai asked after hearing Ashley's voice. I was just commenting on our distance to Titus. I didn't realize we were so close, Ashley said, trying to cover up the fact she had mentioned the game aspect of it. She wasn't entirely sure why she felt the need to hide the fact that this was a game, but something subconsciously was screaming this fact to her. Yeah, soon we will see just how far gone those tainted beings really are, Lloyd said joyfully. Makes you wonder how they actually live. They live in an entirely different environment to us, Kai said, then proceeded to walk over to Lloyd and sort of lean on him. I mean, from our recon, apparently live in a much more primal life than we do. Should be easy to crush their forces. Ashley chuckled at the thought of the invaders having an easy victory. Just because they are primal doesn't mean they aren't powerful. Kai nods in agreement. I suppose you have a point. It was at that moment that a loud digital sound could be heard. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound, which appeared to have come from the platform above the giant screen. On the platform, a figure could be seen walking into view. The figure was at least triple the size of any regular invader, and was wearing a purple cloak that hid their face in the complete darkness with the exception of 2 glowing purple eyes. Protruding out of the cloak looked to be 3 sets of horn-like bones. The first set were actual horns that curved upwards in a semicircle outwards from the invader's head before shooting straight upwards at the tip. The second set curved out from their back, and curved around the area between their body and arms before coming to a point above their head. The last set of bone-like structure came from the back of their shoulders and simply curved upward like knives behind the invader. The last noticeable part of the figure was the large shoulder pads that were shaped to look like the skull of a monster. Everyone knew this figure as they were quite an important figure amongst the invader corps, who goes by many names: Dark Magician, High Priest, and leader of the 13th Corps. But Ashley knew them from a few different names herself, those being Elizabeth, or better known by all as Beth. She's easily Ashley's favorite character from Guardian Tales because of her fun personality later on in the game, and her expansive lore. Ashley couldn't lie to herself. The graphics looked so realistic that Ashley was shaking with excitement from being able to come closer to meeting her favorite character. "Hello, soldiers of the Invader Corps," said Beth, with her voice reaching all corners of the large room. "As I am sure all of you are aware, we will be reaching the home of the tainted being, Titus, within a month. Because the start of the war is on the horizon, I've set up a little competition of sorts that I hope will boost morale and ensure your skills are prepared for the long road ahead of us. This competition will be a free-for-all battle with free admission. Competitors will all enter a large room simultaneously without any outside equipment. The only equipment you'll have access to will be the equipment that will be scattered throughout the battlefield." Beth then paused for a few minutes to look through the crowd. Ashley assumed this was to gauge the excitement from the audience. To Ashley, the audience seemed to be excited for the event already, though after Ashley surveyed the people around her, she looked back up at Beth and their eyes met. Ashley stared directly at Beth for a few moments, and Ashley could swear she saw Beth crack a small smile. "I see you are all excited despite not knowing what you're fighting for yet," Beth said, then paused for a second. "The winner of the competition will get a fully customized weapon of your design. This competition will be held in a week's time." Beth then looked directly at Ashley. "I hope to see you all there, for this will be the last time to test your magic and skills before we have to fight the tainted beings." With this, Beth finally broke eye contact with Ashley to turn around and walk into the unseen portion of the platform. It took a few moments before anyone spoke up, and the first to speak up was Kai. "We should 100% join that competition. Imagine how nice it would be to have our own personal, unique weapon." Lloyd then spoke up next. "I agree. Imagine the damage we could do if we had something calibrated to us." "I do also think we should join the competition. As the High Priest said, it is a great way to shake off the rust of our talents and abilities." "What about you, Ashley?" Sage said, although Ashley didn't respond. She was stuck staring at where Beth had once been, her mind cloudy for reasons she couldn't understand. "Ashley?" Sage repeated a little louder than before. Ashley then shook her head slightly to snap out of her daze, then took a look at Sage. "Sorry, were you saying something?" Yes, we were wondering if you were going to join the competition." Ashley pondered the question for a second, weighing the pros and cons of joining the competition. "I probably will. It'd be nice to know the limits of my capabilities." Kai then jumped up beside Ashley. "That's the spirit, Ashley." Lloyd nodded. "If we're going to get ready for battle, we should prepare for it." The four of them then started walking down the hallway to the training area, but the competition wasn't the thing on Ashley's mind. Instead, Beth's behavior was the only thing she could think of. Beth seemed oddly focused on Ashley, not in the traditional game way either. Her actions didn't seem like they were run from an AI. Instead, Ashley thought they felt more alive, more human.